Hey, it's Techie Talk time once again with State Representative Techie Chan of Quincy. Good to see you, Techie.
Good to see you, Joe. Good to see you a couple of days, 3 days after election night now.
Yeah, appreciate you taking part in that on our unique remote coverage. That was fun.
It was a lot of fun. It was just, I think the audience should know, I get stuck in the waiting room and not knowing exactly when they're going to pop on. So it's different from being in the studio where, you get flagged to come into the studio as opposed to sitting there and suddenly there you are.
I know it was all new for us too. We really didn't know how it was going to go, but overall, we're pretty pleased. We'll have to do the same thing, I think, in November too. So we'd love to have you back.
Oh, absolutely. Always happy to be on for a few minutes or a few hours, depending what makes you happy.
Great, great. So let's talk. Why don't we talk about the election and how you think it went with the four different ways to vote and some of the issues that surrounded that.
I think mail-in ballots was widely popular. I don't think the barrier of people having to apply for a ballot was a big challenge for folks. I think that was one of the big issues that came up in the legislature where advocates were looking for ballot access to not have applications to receive a ballot. I do know that states like California and Utah does let you have a ballot about application. And the concerns was that there'd be a barrier of access. Well, clearly that's not the case given the sheer high numbers of mail-in ballot requests at over 10,000 in Quincy alone, and over 800 to 900,000 statewide. And even then, what was it? 33% of Democrats voted in the Democratic primary, give or take a little bit of half a percentage point, and that translates to roughly 20,000, just about, people participated in Quincy's primary election. So, about half of it came in an absentee ballot. I understand a good number went to early vote, and some folks, did the drop off at the mailbox in City Hall. So I think it went very well, and I didn't hear about a lot of confusion in any part. And I wouldn't mind following up with our city clerk Nikki to see how she thought it went. I haven't done it yet, but I'll give her a call and see what her thoughts are.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see. I know she's preparing for obviously much higher turnout in November, given the presidential race. So that's something to be considered. There's actually a resolution coming up before the city council next week. Councilor Palmucci asking for things like curbside voting and neighborhood drop boxes, maybe voting at fire stations, things of that nature, just to be able to even expand access even more.
Yeah, that's intriguing because, as you all know, the challenge with the Postal Service on the federal level is driving a lot of those questions. And Speaker DeLeo and Minority Leader Brad Jones in the House sent a joint letter with pretty much the entire branch, my branch, the House branch, asking Congress and the President of Post Office General Postmaster General to ensure the integrity of the Postal Service going into November, especially. It's an intriguing idea from Councilor Palmucci. I think one of the challenges is security of the drop boxes themselves. You always can bolt down a box at City Hall, which will be bolting down and lock boxing those in the fire stations. I'm a little less inclined to have people just drop a ballot in an unsecure area, particularly one that's mobile. I think dropping a mailbox at Post Service, dropping at City Hall, even dropping day of election, go straight into the ballot box is secure. I think the challenge would be have multiple locations and you're going to have to bolt it down to the ground and
Right.
secure the system.
Yeah. How much is the mail-in balloting costing the state? And does the Secretary of State have a budget for that?
The Secretary of State had to bake it into his existing budget for his elections currently. I'm going to suspect there'll be a supplemental budget coming down the ways, most likely using a portion of our reserves, a rainy day fund, or we'll probably shuffle some more COVID money around, which is constantly moving COVID money back and forth, different agencies to backfill his budget at some point. So I understand the Secretary had concerns early on regarding mail-in ballots and the cost. He still was able to pull it off. Secretary Galvin's incredible on creative thinking on making sure we have secure elections and everyone gets their ballot. But I promise we're going to be hearing from the secretary soon about backfilling his budget after he's spending all this money.
Sure. Do you think this is mail-in balloting is something that's going to stick around even, post-pandemic?
I was talking to my colleague about this in Western Mass in Springfield, and we're discussing exactly how popular this mail-in ballot is. And a little bit of trivia, which I actually have to look up. It turns out that you cannot do mail-in ballots in a non-act of God situation. It's in the Constitution. So the Constitution actually mandates absentee ballots for people unable to attend because of inability to access the polls, physically get to the polls. So the legislature, in its creativity, took advantage of that little loophole in the Constitution, or maybe not loophole, more like a criteria, by claiming that COVID is an act of God that inhibits people from being able to get to the polls, or creates circumstances where people are unable to physically get to the polls, which is what an absentee ballot is. So when we talked the last few times that what we're doing now is the expanded absentee ballot, under the state constitution, that's exactly what we've done. Now, going forward, can we continue this outside of a state of emergency? That's going to be a challenge. And I suspect we're going to have a ballot initiative or a amendment filed by a legislator to the Constitution next year. They will have to go through the process of 2 legislative cycles approving the constitutional amendment and being put before the voters. So potentially in a post-pandemic situation of permanent mail-in ballots, the voters' earliest opportunity to potentially vote on a constitutional amendment could be 2024. So, yeah, this is a bit of trivia I never had to know.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, COVID-19 has brought up all kinds of law that I didn't know about, and even I'm try to be as versed as possible in how things work around here. So I'm learning something new under the Constitution. I need to pick it up myself. I'll look into it. But
okay, yeah, I'd be curious. Would that apply to municipal elections too, city elections, or would a city have to create its own law to allow mail-in balloting?
The city would have to create its own law because the state constitution applies to everybody.
Okay. Oh, interesting. I think it's popular. The only confusion that I heard was people who requested a mail-in ballot but didn't use it weren't sure if they could still go and vote, or vice versa. If they did use it, could they go and change their vote? So that there was a little bit of confusion there about that.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand. This was kind of expected. I mean, as I kind of said earlier, you got to pick. We're going to do it. Pick one to go do. Don't mail it in and vote.
Right. Obviously. Yeah.
Bring your ballot. We were talking about the last week or so. Bring your ballot to it. If you got a mail-in ballot, bring it to your polling location like you normally do. Get it to City Hall somehow day of or before 8 p.m. So, yeah, I mean, that was expected. I mean, this is new. People have done it before.
Right.
I think the instructions are fairly straightforward, but even then I can understand some confusion may arise regarding questions. I'm hoping that a lot of the over 20,000 some odd voters in Quincy who had the first time experience voting in this pandemic situation, I'm sure there's going to be another 20,000 more because I'm thinking maybe it's a 65-70% turnout in November.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Was watching the news, maybe watching the podcasts on QATV to get updated on how to vote in November, since a lot of folks, already had trial run. So perhaps half the voters in Quincy's already done the trial run.
Right. Yeah, there'll be 2 weeks of early voting leading up to November. So not just 1 week. So that alone will expand, access. And then, of course, mail-in and then absentee and then in-person voting, too. But there were no lines, no waiting at the polls back on Tuesday, probably because so many people took advantage of the other ways.
Absolutely. And, and we went smoothly. There was a lot of fear from people saying, oh, it's going to take forever to get the ballots counted. We won't hear about it for 5 days. The city clerk's office did well. I mean, they got stuff really in by about 10 p.m.-ish. As you guys were waiting at QATV, I was watching online the Boston Globe as they brought numbers in from all over the state.
Yeah.
I think the vast majority of clerks did a wonderful job. in this. And the city clerk in Quincy and the staff and the poll workers and the police officers and all the other folks that keep this place running did a very good job on timely results.
Yeah, other than, in the 4th Congressional District, there was a little hiccup there, but I think that was more a logistical error more than, any other confusion.
Yeah, and, I don't have a full story. I mean, we're still getting some news out of that media-wise, but one of the stories in the media I heard is some folks didn't feel they had to count the ballots that night, which I'm like, where were you when the other 300-plus communities decided to do the ballot? I'm pretty confident everyone got the same memo.
Right. That's election day, is that day, yeah.
Yeah, I don't get it. I understand that, some places, for example, my friend in Medford, Paul Donato, had a primary race, and I was waiting for numbers like 3:30 in the morning because I'm a junkie. So, I don't go to bed election nights as I'm reading numbers all night long. And I asked him about it. He goes, well, they had the ballots. They were counting election night, but there was a lot of ballots, so it took longer for them to run them through the machines.
Right, yeah.
So that's understandable. If you have a huge volume and you're understaffed and you weren't really prepared for the first time coming in, they have now time to prepare November around the state for the clerk's office to get these ballots done as quickly as possible night of.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of numbers, I know you were uncontested, but how did your numbers look, Tacky?
It was very good. I got over 7,000 votes. Thank you very much for everybody that voted. 33% turnout. That's about right in my mind regarding the turnout in relation to the number of votes, even in this uncontested situation. So that's consistent. And looking around with Cruz and Ron's and John's and other numbers of people uncontested, the numbers are consistent with past history because I track this stuff. Before even I got elected, I look at these numbers forever.
Right.
The difference is, I think, from last elections, I saw this last year's election too, is that the population clearly in my district has gone up. And clearly there's more registered voters than there were in my first election.
Huh.
So I figured there's somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 more registered voters in my district than when I first started running.
Wow. Is that because of just new development or more people moving in?
Yeah, more people moving in. My part of the city includes Quincy Center, High Point.
Okay.
Obviously a lot of development down Hancock Street. There are a few new developments down in Ward 1, but not that many. I represent a lot of the Granite Street area, also, so Corey Street. So I'm in a high development zone. So I suspect a lot of those voters. I think there's a lot of people who are new registered voters. There's a lot of stimulation this year because of the national election. Right. That people participate. And of course, having a contested election this year of Markey and Kennedy encourages more registered voters as well. But I have noticed an upward trend in my numbers in the Democratic primaries upticking, of course, relative to the size of the turnout, because turnout determines the uptick.
Yes.
But in relation to the past numbers, there is clearly an uptick in Democratic registered voters in my district.
Interesting. And which your district is entirely in the city of Quincy, too, the second Norfolk, which which is unusual.
Yeah, I mean, there is growth. I mean, we talk about the census a lot, and I think the voter registration reflects the growth of the city. Mm-hmm. So, I don't see this trend stopping on more registered Democratic voters. And I think, I said a bit earlier, there's a lot of strong interest in participation in politics this particular cycle. So, I'm happy to have more registered Democratic voters. I'm not going to argue about it.
Yeah. How did you vote, Tacky?
I voted by mail.
By mail?
Took it by mail. I got my mail-in request very on. I got a turnaround time of about 3 days to get in my mail-in ballot to the House. And then, we hang on to it for about 4 days or so, me and Mom, and then went through the ballot and picked our voters and took it down to the Wallaston post office and dropped it off and made it to the clerk's office inside of 5 days or so. You can give, obviously there's a website now you can do a register to vote. Secretary Galvin had made a huge press announcement, and I'll reiterate here that we are very concerned about the Postal Service in terms of how the federal government is dealing with its funding and things like that, that you shouldn't wait too long to get your ballot in. If you're 100% confident this is the person you want to vote for, get your ballots in early if you have a mail-in ballot.
Yeah, it's great advice. Absolutely. And you can even track it. I voted by mail also, mostly because I wanted to experiment because I'd never done it before. So there is a website you can actually track your ballot and find out, when it was accepted at your city or town clerk's office.
Yeah, it tells you when your mail-in ballot application request showed up in the clerk's office.
Yep.
And it tells you when your mail-in ballot actually arrives in the clerk's office. So if you're concerned you don't see it and it's closing on election day, definitely go down to the polling place and vote, or you do early voting, and they will have the checkoff box because they have to check you off when your ballot comes in anyway. So you're not going to double vote. It isn't going to happen because they have the checkoff box at the voting location and early voting location, or you go to City Hall as part of early voting, and also when you do mail-in ballot. So people need to remember it's not just when they check you off for getting a ballot, they also check you off when your ballot's turned in. So when you vote in person, they check you in and they check you out.
Yep.
Same thing has to happen in these mail-in ballots, which is, I do understand it's a lot more work for the clerk's office.
Yeah.
But that's when you ensure that it's one person, one vote.
Yeah, and even complicating things even more is doing this all with social distancing guidelines and sanitization guidelines during a pandemic. So that just adds another layer of detail to be thought of.
Yeah, health and safety is very important at this stage. I mean, we want everyone to exercise their right to vote. We want to do it safely. We don't want anyone to get hurt or sick or anything like that at all. That's why we created so many options for you to vote. Definitely, bring your own pen if you're uncomfortable. I mean, it isn't complicated.
Right. Yep. Exactly. A clipboard if you don't want to use the booth, that's acceptable as well. I know here in Quincy, the city clerk was asking for some identification. Any idea why that might have been?
I don't actually know the answer to that question, to be honest with you. I think it's more a precautionary issue to expedite check-in. So, when you vote, you say what street, what number, then your name. If you hand over an ID, it expedites them looking up your name.
Okay.
So it's a speed issue.
Okay.
Secondly, I don't know what the purge situation like regarding the purge. If you're an inactive voter for a long period of time, even if you're still registered, you get purged from the rolls.
Yes.
So people don't realize don't vote. You eventually assume you're dead or you're gone. So you're no longer on the list. So if there's a concern about the fact you believe you've been registered to vote and you're still in the rolls, but for some reason you may have been purged, they want to see your ID and they could issue a provisional ballot. We've done that before. I saw that happen 6 years ago.
Okay.
When we did a massive purge, and there was a lot of provisional ballots. Well, they get your IDs and try to match up against an old registered book, and then try to make sure that you still get an active voter, and they won't count your votes and confirm you're an active voter.
Right. Yeah. Some people just only vote in the national elections or the presidential elections, so they may let the local elections slide, and therefore they could go inactive.
That's correct. And people don't need to understand that you go inactive too long, we presume you moved away or you're dead. I mean, it's pretty straightforward.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. You mentioned the census. Any updated figures for us, Tacky?
Yeah, we're getting good here. Nationally, 65.2%. Massachusetts is ahead of the curve at 67.6%. Quincy's bumped up huge, 67.3%. Great job. We're closing very fast. We've always been over a percentage point behind the state average. Our neighbors continue to do much better than we do. Weymouth at 74%, Braintree at 78.3%, Randolph at 69.4%, Milton at 81.5%, and Holbrook at 74.3%. But there's a crinkle now. There's a new data set that's coming out. Since they're now door knocking and telephoning people to fill out the census, if you have not filled the census, you're going to have someone come by and do social distance reminders and help you out fill those forms. It's 10 easy questions to do so. As a result of door knocking and people getting out there on phones to remind folks and help them out, Massachusetts is closing in on, where's my sheet of paper here? Hang on. I was staring at it, not looking it all the way through. We're at over 80%. I think I wrote down 84.9%.
Oh, okay.
It's at 88% even. We're at 88% even on total participation. So Massachusetts total participation is 88%.
Yeah.
So hopefully that translates to Quincy as well. But we still got to October 31st. You can self-report online, 2020census.gov.
Mm-hmm.
It saves a poll worker from coming to your door knock, a census worker from coming to the door knock on your door, and social distance asks you to vote. The more initiative you take yourself, the less contact with COVID-19. So
that's right.
Strongly encouraged again that this opportunity for self-reporting is out there. In Massachusetts, 57% of people have reported via internet. So it's been extraordinarily popular to do so.
Yep, that's how I did it. It was quick and easy and painless, and there's no reason not to, really.
Yeah, best form of social distancing, the internet.
Any Labor Day weekend plans, Tacky?
I'm still hiding at home, folks. I think haven't changed my pattern. If you made fun of my hair last time out, and I make fun of my own hair too. So it is getting bigger. I will have to figure out some social distance safety haircutting at some point. For those who tuning in new, I do live with my mother. My mother has an immune compromised situation going on, so we're extra cautious here at the house and limiting my contact with human beings immensely, both of us. So you see me out there, my mask on and shopping, less about being rude and trying to be expedient, try not to increase my odds of bringing something home.
Sure. Yeah, totally understandable. Hopefully next time we see you, you'll be a little bit more coiffed. We'll see what happens.
Figure that part out. Sitting in one spot to try to get a haircut. My haircutter is an old friend of mine.
Okay.
He's working with folks trying to figure out how to make everybody comfortable too. And it's challenge of COVID world, and he's trying to, obviously pay rent like everybody else, get things paid for and keep on moving.
Yeah.
When I talk to him, he's working very, very hard to try to ensure a safe environment.
Sure. I think
we'll work something out somehow. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Gotta go, Tacky, but good to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Yeah, glad we had a good chance to meet today on Friday, and we'll set a time very soon next week, and we'll continue onward.
Sounds good. All right, be well.
Have a good weekend.